Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first edition of 2021 Dialogues. The series that started in 2019 is a partnership from Firjan with Faperj to debate aloud different themes related to the innovation environment. The object of the series is to innovate, creating connection points between different actors, government, companies, academies, startups, development institutions, and third sector. In 2019, our focus were the national innovation ecosystems. In 2021, we're going to have 6 editions, once per month, about international innovation ecosystems, always with an international speaker, bringing an international case, and a national speaker presenting national cases of success in Brazil. To follow up and to have more information about the dialogues and the series and the encounters, you can follow up Firjan Instagram. About the Sede Cidadania campaign in the states of Rio de Janeiro, we have many people that live with less than enough, and they are extremely vulnerable due to the pandemic. So reinforcing our social transformation role, Firjan got together with the members of Rio de Janeiro and some partners, and it's working in this urgency. We have in our hands the opportunity to help millions of people to go through this period with more humanity. As Citizenships Against Hunger, it's from Viva Rio, SOS Favela, and Caminhão da Misericórdia. And we are going to receive financial resources for people that are extremely vulnerable in the state, all together for Rio. We have a QR code to donate to the campaign, and we also have the website in the video description. With this, I would like to present here and pass the floor for the mediator of this dialogues, Dr. Caetano Pinheira. He's a researcher for the Center of Challenges in Holland and a consultant in Faperj. Professor Caetano, the floor is yours. Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, everybody. Welcome for the first event of Innovation Dialogues in Firjan and Faperj. I'm also a professor in the Economy and Technology and Industrial Economy in the University of Rio de Janeiro. But here today, I'm a consultant from Faperj, and it's going to be a pleasure to talk with both guests about the transformation of this digital transformation process. We will look at the Estonian case, Estonia that implemented since the 90s, since the independence of the former Soviet Union in 1991, different initiatives that started this digitalization of the society in the public and private sector. It was a choice, but it was not a unified strategy as an industrial plan. We had different initiatives that had that come together in this, and we have a gigantic list of initiatives. But in the 90s, we already have the internet as a social right available throughout the country. They created this intelligent identity in the 90s. In the 2000s, they have the X-Road initiatives, digital voting throughout the cell phones, the e-voting, this blockchain using. Today we talk about the blockchains with the bitcoins, but it was the pioneer to use this the electronic use since 2010. For the international entrepreneurs can use this public digital services, and Florian Marcos is going to talk about this. Without further ado, I would like to present our first guest, Florian Marcos, that is the expert in digitalization and consulting in digital transformation in Estonia Briefing Center, and a member of the Commission in Electronic Governance in the United Nations for Development. He works explaining to hide delegations in his position in briefing center, how you can do so digitalization work in the domestic governments. And I believe that today we will learn a little bit more about how we could go deeper in this digital transformation in our country. He will talk for 20 minutes, and as he finishes, I will present our second guest, Luis Felipe Monteiro, that is the Secretary of the Digital Government, and we'll talk more about him. Florian, the floor is yours. Bem, primeiramente, muito obrigado.
Thank you and greetings from Tallinn, Estonia. That was a very good introduction. You mentioned every single thing that Estonia has done over the last 30 years. So I think we can finish this presentation and maybe you can have a lovely lunch. But no, I will still tell you a bit more about what Estonia has been up to and also talk about what Estonia is doing right now and perhaps also a bit about the future plans. So as you will know, the digital identity in Estonia is compulsory. I am a foreigner, I'm German, but even I get this electronic identity card with a chip card at the back and a personal code on the front, which is the number that all the different government authorities use to exchange and store data about me. One of the fundamental principles that made effective data management possible was the once only policy, meaning that there is always only one government authority that can store my data online and ask for it. Meaning, when I go to the doctor, when I go to the car registry, they are not allowed to ask my address. They have to ask the address from the one authority that is allowed to store that address, so you don't enter all the same information again and again and again. We see very promising moves both in this area and other sections of e-government, also in Brazil. So it's very encouraging to see what you're doing these days. But so this happened in the late 1990s in Estonia, primarily because we were, as was mentioned, a poor post-Soviet nation that was actually regaining independence on my birthday in 1991. One thing that I want to mention perhaps before we get into the details is that it might be easy for you as Brazilians to look at Estonia and say, very interesting, but not relevant for us. We are a nation of hundreds of millions of people, and we don't care about what a nation of 1.3 million, like basically one part of or one district of Sao Paulo or Rio de Janeiro is, in terms of population. Why should we care about your experiences? And the answer is very simple. There is one ranking in which Brazil and Estonia are almost right next to each other. There's only one country between the two of us, and that is population density. Estonia is facing the same challenge as Brazil is in terms of bringing its government services to the population, especially in regions where it makes no sense for the government to have a government office. It doesn't make sense for the government of Brazil to have a government office in every single village in Amazonia. It doesn't make sense. So how do we provide all of these different government services to the population, both in the city centers and in the rural regions, both for the young elites and for the elderly that maybe have some trouble with digitalization? And there are three answers for us. Number one, you still should offer your digital services also offline. There are some people that can't or don't want to engage with digitalization. Your back end can still be digital. The data exchange can still be digital. But if people want to do something on paper, sometimes that's the best choice for them. People with disabilities are a good example as well. The second point is education, education, education. This is what most countries struggle with because, quite frankly, for politicians, it's not a very attractive undertaking. Politicians like to stand in front of a bridge or an airport saying, look, I built this with my money and my political support. But with education, that's very difficult. And the effects of your education policies will show effects in sort of 10 years maybe. So not very attractive. And the third thing, and this is what we want to talk about today, is make your digital services actually solve problems. When most politicians around the world look at digitalization, they primarily interpret it as follows. Right now we have a 30-page tax declaration on paper. Why don't we turn this into a 30-page PDF? Job done. It's online now, right? But then people are surprised that no one cares. No one uses the online service because you are not saving money, you are not saving time, you are not saving stress. And that's why people will not engage with your digital solutions. So your digital services have to have a different quality. In Estonia, for example, the tax declaration takes 3 minutes on average. So no longer stamping papers and sending them from department to department. You can do your taxes in 3 minutes. And that's why, on average, 98.3% of the population file their taxes online. So it's not just the young, it's not just the educated, it's not just the urbans, it is also the elderly, the rural, the less educated. Because you created a service that is as easy to understand and as useful as something like Google Maps or Facebook or Gmail or anything like that. So you have to copy the design language and the service thinking from the private sector. So with this small introduction out of the way, I want to show you a few examples of how it all looks in the Estonian e-government space. So I will share my screen now with you. I hope you can see this page. This is eesti.ee. It's the Estonian state portal. I'm already logged in as a citizen, so with my own role. You can log in with your electronic ID card. You can also log in with an app called Smart ID. There are many different solutions. And one of the first important steps that we took was to structure all of the different services according to topics instead of government authority area of responsibility. Because people, humans, don't really think in terms of government structures. They think in terms of topics. What do I need to get done? Oh, it has to do something with my family. It has something to do with my health. That's how people think about things, right? So that's why when we click on topics, here we have all the different subject areas, and under doing business, for example, yes, you can establish your company, takes around 20 minutes online. Yes, you can pay your taxes. Yes, you can follow a public procurement, or you could also register for e-residency, which was mentioned in the introduction. Basically, any person in the world can get an electronic identity from Estonia and run a business in Estonia virtually while living anywhere in the world, including Brazil, of course. So this was the first step for us to think about how people consume services, not how we would like to offer them ideally for the government side. And the second step were these so-called live events, where we would tie all of the different topics that happen in a particular situation, where we would tie all of these things together. For example, for the birth of a child, you will need to take care of registering your kid for a family doctor. You probably want a birth certificate. You probably want to apply for some sort of social benefits from the government if there are any available. So all of these things in most countries you have to do separately, one by one by one. In Estonia, we try to tie it into one coherent service journey. And the third step that I want to talk about for now is what we call proactive services. So instead of you applying for something or you starting a service, why don't we turn around that logic? Why don't we say, when a child is born in Estonia, the doctor registers the birth of the child automatically, and he creates a personal code for the baby. And that personal code of the baby is connected to the two personal codes of the two parents. That's been happening for 20 years. But if the government now knows, number one, there is a new baby, number two, these are the parents, then the parents started asking, why do we still apply for child benefit payments? Why don't we get, here in the top right corner, why don't we get a notification that says, congratulations on the birth of your child, to which bank account do we send the money? You know, the government knows everything it needs in order to provide that service proactively. And we can go much, much deeper with this. We can use data sets that most governments around the world have and just connect them in new ways, in innovative ways. I'll give you one more example. Let's stick with the childbirth, but go in the area of education. If the government knows a child is born, it knows the address of the parents, and it knows that every child must attend primary school, then we could create a new service that says, again, with a notification, congratulations on the birth of your child. Here are the 3 closest primary schools to your location. You can choose one of those schools, and we will reserve a place for your child at that school 6 years into the future. So number one, you no longer have to remember to register your kid for primary school at some point. And much more importantly, every single school in the country would also get a notification saying, hey, we know how many students you have right now. We know how many classrooms you have. We know how many teachers you have working in that school. So we also know that in 6 years, there will be 500 more students than you have right now. By that calculation, we will need 30 new classrooms, 50 new teachers, and we can start with the building applications, with the funding, with the teacher training today, so that the resources are ready in 6 years when they are needed. What's very important for me to emphasize is that this has nothing to do with science fiction. Again, this is about data and reusing data that most governments around the world already have today. It's just about connecting them in a different, in an innovative way. And when we're talking about data, one question that very quickly arises is, but what about privacy? What about data protection? How can I be sure that my data is not used illegally by all the different government authorities every single time that they just want to look at my data for fun? You know, how do we make sure that this does not happen? And this is a very valid concern. And I would say that digitalization can be used to create a much more transparent, a much more accountable, a much more reliable government than paper bureaucracy ever could. I'll give you one simple example. If we click here on this button, you will see the data tracker. And in the data tracker, you can click on the different registers that hold my data. And then you will see, after a few seconds of loading, every single time which government authority looked at what part of my data, when, and most importantly, for what reason. In what context did a certain authority look at my data? So this gives the citizen a very good overview of how their data is being used. And if they think that there's something illegal, then we have the Data Protection Inspectorate to which they can turn and submit a case for review. To be honest, this system does work. And at the beginning, when the system was introduced, many people were caught misusing the system. There is one example of a doctor who looked at the medical data of his ex-wife to see whether his ex-wife had gotten pregnant with someone else over the last few years. Now, first of all, of course, that is completely illegal. And second, these days, you don't need the medical files. You would probably just look on Instagram. But back then, that was not an option. So that's what the doctor did. The ex-wife immediately found out, because she has this data tracker, went to the Data Protection Inspectorate. And as a result of the investigation, the doctor lost his medical practicing license for the rest of his life. We take data protection very seriously. And the fines can go from financial fines to up to 14 years in jail for data abuse. So again, it's a very serious issue, and the government has to show that it is accountable in that area. So this is just a very small overview of what is possible in the Estonian state portal. One of the things that we at the Briefing Center do is, yes, of course, we tell the story, but we also want to create much stronger international cooperation in this field. So there's a very simple reason for this. The reason is the following. It's great if all of these things work digitally in Estonia. E-prescription, online voting, digital signature, all of that stuff. It's great. But it is not so great if Estonia is the only country where this works. What if I, for example, am a German citizen and I would like to sign a document with a German government authority or the German embassy in Estonia? I can't do that right now. Even though we have, shared European frameworks through the European Union. So there is a lot of work to be done in the area of interoperability, not just in the EU, but also with very important partners such as Brazil, so that our solutions can work together. My dream would be that maybe in a few years, an Estonian can travel to Brazil, forget his prescription medicine at home, and just go with his Estonian ID card to a Brazilian pharmacy and get his prescription medicine without having to go to a Brazilian doctor, without having to go through the system, and the other way around. So this is what we're working on. This is my dream for the next few years. And I hope that this small presentation gave you a bit of appetite for what is possible in the area of e-government and international cooperation. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Florian. Very interesting introduction. It really inspires us of the potentiality of digital transformation and what we can do with data. I will raise the questions later on, and we'll have the panel discussion, but just to tease you and for you to reflect, I think my question is if you were to give an advice for a country like Brazil, where to start this process? What would be the first initiative? But don't answer now, think about it, and after the next speaker, then you'll come back with this. So, obrigado. Eu agora vou introduzir o nosso segundo convidado. Primeiro, eu queria até falar uma coisa.
I want to say something I forgot to mention, but one of the reasons that I was asked to be the moderator because I did my master in Estonia. I went to Estonia in 2007. I stayed there for 1 year studying technological governance, and that's why I know a little bit about this Estonian digital transformation. Less about me, more about our secretary. It's from the Ministry of Economia, Luis Felipe Sari Monteiro. He was named one of the most influenced people in the digital transformation and e-governments in 2020. He's a president of the SET, and he's a member from DataPrev. He's the Brazilian representative in the innovation in the private sector of OCDE, along other positions that he has. Luis Felipe, the floor is yours. Thank you once again for your presence. Thank you, Caetano. Thank you, Firjan. Good morning. Thank you, Florian, for your presentation. I was talking with Marcus when we were preparing ourselves that Estonia and Brazil already have a relationship in the digital area, that they are close. We exchange a lot of ideas. Estonia is a friend for us, and we are always talking about the challenges and the opportunities. It will be excellent to have a citizen from Estonia being attended by a pharmacy here only with his e-card, and also a Brazilian citizen going to Europe with this digital process that already exists in Connect SUS. It's an app that was recently launched and already had all the vaccines, history, exams, and other functionalities. So what I would like to tell you first, for those who are watching us, good morning. This is a I know that everybody is hungry already, but I just want to speak briefly what we are doing here in Brazil. And if I'm successful in my speech, to give a little bit of, hope that we are going through the right path. I will also share my screen briefly to show you some slides about what we are doing here in the country. Before anything, what I'm talking here, and I invite everyone to interact with us, it's gov.com.br. It's a portal where we have all the information in more details, and also our social networks. It's a way where you can follow up the advantages and everything that we have here. And we have a lot of collaborations. That's why I invite you to be part of this trajectory. We are the fourth biggest users in the world. We have more than 440 million in the world, 99% of them using the internet through their cell phones. The Brazilian usually stays 9 hours per day connected. This is 30% over the North Americans. It seems that we like technology, and this has been the universe of many opportunities, not only for a digital economy in Brazil, but also for the digital transformation and the governance that I have the honor to do in the Brazilian government. Each event that we have in the digital government, we also have the advance in our indicators of GDP, human development, international commerce. So this digital government is not only using this technology, is not only innovation and creating new things, is exactly the economic and social development in the country. But what is digital governance? According to OECD, it's to create public value, but it only exists in the citizen perspective. So what we have done in the last decades, it was using the technology to accelerate processes in the governments, but always looking for the public services to improve our funding processes. And 100% of the Brazilians, they do their declaration digitally. Now they do in a few minutes because the declaration is pre-fill up. So they already give the information for the contributors. But there's a defense that we had in the last decades. It was, we had some gaps in the public policies, in the social benefits, and we are trying to accelerate this for the citizens. Here we have some benefits that you can see in the economical point of view. We have 1.6 trillion in the economy that is divided in many segments. Only the digital can generate between 65 to 85 billion of reais to the government. But how we are doing this in the Brazilian government? We are 15 years behind. So the first government, it's Denmark. Denmark was the first strategy in 2001 with this digital strategy, and we had that 15 years later. One of the first actions that we had was to do this cooperation with Denmark that we already has 5 years, to understand how they do that together with the United Kingdom and South Korea and our friends from Estonia. So to accelerate this process and have Brazil faster in this digital transformation and the advances that the citizen is more included than he was in the 2000, we decided that gov.br, it's going, and it is already in practice, a shared platform that solves digital problems in the state and in your own city. The gov.br, it's a unique portal, so you can see all the services, information, news about the federal government. We offer more than 4,000 services in this platform, and 68% are already digital. So our mission is to get to the end of the next year with 100% of the services offered digitally, allowing the citizen to use 24/7 without leaving his house. We had this month 100 million users, 100 million Brazilians already with this identity in gov.br, what makes gov.br one of the 5 portals that are more accessible in the world right now. This in less than 1.5 years. In the last years, you can see in the numbers, we accelerate the offer. That is the first stage of the digital transformation, to position yourself and deliver your services. But more than this, services, what it's good are the real situations where the citizen can use this digital as an advantage. During the pandemic, for example, with all those agencies that are closed due to the lockdowns, more than 90% of the assistances were requested through this digital wallet. We had more than 500,000 that were requested digitally without going to the agency. We have the INSS, we have the demand, the profile of this demand that was presence, and now that is more than 90% digital through My INSS. Is an app that you can download. You can ask for your you can start your retirement and any other service that you need. I don't have time to explore all the cases, but we have the case of Pedro that was he had to go through the entire city to be able to get his assistance. Rosane that was fired in 2018, but she was happy that now she could do everything digitally through this app. The strategy of this digital governance we are executed goes from 2020 to 2021, is the second version of this strategy, and mainly it deals up to 58 initiatives. I invite you to follow in the same portal that I just showed you, gov.br, but it's centered in the citizen. All the products are tested with real citizens. Our team has to go to the streets, to the bus stations, to the public fairs to understand the consumption of these public services. Everything is integrated where they can circulate as X-Road was done in Estonia, and not the citizen has to carry a brief with a lot of documents, but the document have data for public policies. It can be the intelligence, it can be a government that will protect your critical infrastructures and safety, and also protect the privacy of each citizens, so you can trust, and a government that it's open for the social control and transparency and the efficiency. So we use people where they are important. That is the analytical strategies, the analytical activities, and strategic activities. So you don't need protocols, you don't need all this bureaucracy, people putting stamps in each paper. So I tell you, this journey that accelerated in the last 2.5 years, and that has all the organizations, the public and federal organizations that are enrolled in this priority, and now we can say some states and municipalities also integrated to gov.br to do this transformation, allow that Brazil would go in an accentuated way in the international perspectives. So we have today, we are the 20th country in the world with the best digital services. As I said, Denmark is in the first place. In the American continent, in South America, we are leaders. In the American continent, we are behind the United States. OECD also put Brazil as the 16th country in the world to be evaluated, one of the best to be evaluated. We are going through we are talking about developed countries, and to be the 16th with the digital government, it was a result that was done last year with data from 2019. On top of most countries from OECD and countries that we already know, and we usually compare ourselves and try to search what they are doing. So what comes next of everything that we are doing? That is a number of digital services. The future is, as my colleague said, personalized services and predictive policies to use data in an intelligent ways, respecting the privacy, so we can preview the Brazilians' needs and in a personalized way. So where he is and in that moment, what does he need? It's more than a click and a relationship with the government, where his journey it's being fulfilled with these digital services. Just to finalize, I would like to talk about this platform that it's the main point of this portal. And as my friend from Estonia said, we have the EID from Estonia, the Aadhaar from India, and NIM ID from Denmark. We use these references to create this Brazilian ID that is already operating in more than 3,000 public services, and it started to operate this year for the private sector. And we are already integrated to 7 banks, the 7 biggest banks in Brazil. Bank of Brazil, Caixa Econômica, Santander, Bradesco, and many other banks. So the citizen can already go into the public services using this unique ID, but he can also do this cross-check, this validation with the bank services that he rather use his credential from the Bank of Brazil to access his public services, and according to the level of trust that he has in this account with this credential, accessing more and more services. So to finalize, I believe that what we can do, I believe that the questions will be excellent, but I would like to say that digital is not going to change Brazil. We have to work with people and not with technology, but the digital will help Brazilians, and Brazilians will change Brazil. Our WhatsApp and Instagram and social networks. This is our stamp. What we hope is that Brazil is digital, and digital throughout Brazil. Thank you, and let talk. I believe it's very important. Thank you, Firjan, once again for this opportunity. Thank you, Secretary, for your presentation. I'm happy to see that we advanced in these last years in the digital governance. I believe that it brings some hopes for us to keep advancing and to make the citizen life easier to get, so the services get to Brazil throughout these initiatives. I also like to bring to reflection, I will go back to Florian next, but if possible, when you come back to talk a little bit more about the exploration, how the municipality and the states are using gov.br. And I'm also representing Faperj, that is an institution from the state of Rio de Janeiro. So I'd like to hear how the states and the municipalities are using this gov.br and how they could use more this platform. Florian. Bem, voltando à minha pergunta para você, como
started, but probably also of relevance to cities and municipalities. How do you digitalize your government? Do you need to start from scratch, as you say, as it is said, digital by design, or can you also start by digitalizing current services and actually establishing new databases or digitalizing old databases? So how to start in that sense, or starting some in a different way, please?
So I think no country ever starts truly from scratch, right? It's sometimes said that Estonia had a sort of greenfield approach where you could just, start with new ideas. But we had a population register that we took over from the Soviet Union, so paper data exists in every country. So the answer is you should absolutely on a running process digitize the data that you already have like on paper readily available, but also make the transition in the different government authorities, in the medical sector, all the different branches that are affected, so that, organically this digital transformation will take place. One way or another, I think this is the most logical way, because digitalization does not happen in a vacuum. You don't always have 100% political support. No government authority ever has the entire IT budget that it wants. So you always have to prioritize what's the next service, what's the next service. One thing that I would maybe point out very quickly is the question that is connected to this sometimes is, should we start digital transformation sort of from the bottom up or from the top down? And I think the answer is both. From the bottom up, the service innovation has to come. The Ministry of Agriculture knows best what agriculture services should be online. It makes no sense for the Prime Minister to decide that. At the same time, there are areas where the national government should say, yes, digital identity should be compulsory, just to sort of bring everyone on the same baseline, so that not every region can decide its own security or infrastructure or anything like that. So this actually creates wonderful opportunities for Brazil as a federal country, where in terms of innovation, the bottom-up innovation, the different states, the different municipalities and districts, they can try out a lot of stuff. And then the other states can say, oh, that worked really well, actually. Why don't we do that as well? So this is something that Luigi also mentioned. And I think it cannot be emphasized enough.
Thank you very much, Florian. So also raising one question from the audience to you, which is about whether Estonia utilizes facial recognition for any service. So a very, very straightforward question. And yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I saw the question. The quick answer is no, because we're quite careful with biometrics. If it's your fingerprint, I can cut off your finger and I have access to all of your data because your fingerprints won't change. If it's about an iris scanner or vein scanners or something, there's always a way to hack this stuff. For now, until we have mind-reading machines, which will be scary in its own way. So as long as we don't have that, the safest is a combination of PINs in connection with two-factor authentication, like an app, like an ID card. So biometrics, not for now.
Thank you. Before I turn to the questions to the Secretary, another question about privacy. Did Estonia establish a privacy regulation at what moment in time? When it from the beginning, it started with concerns and regulation for privacy, or it only came later as it became a concern for the citizens?
So I guess the area of privacy in the late 90s, early 2000s was not such a big concern as it is today. But sort of by accident, Estonia created very strong privacy laws. So the target for Estonia was rather effective and secure data management. The once-only policy is a very good example, where they didn't care so much about the privacy aspect, but it turned out to be very good for privacy. So there was a very recent interview with our president, Kersti Kaljulaid, where she said that in comparison with Estonian privacy regulation, the GDPR is, quote, child's play. So we were lucky that we built it up like that.
Thank you. The GDPR is the regulation from the European Union, which establishes some requirements for the use of data, including by universities. For instance, if I'm as a researcher from University of Utrecht in the Netherlands, will collect data from someone, I need to abide to this regulation. But I guess that the lesson is that when you advance in your digitalization process, then it will naturally emerge this need for the privacy regulation. So maybe, although we tend to think, okay, we need privacy regulations very strong before we can advance, no, I think it goes hand by hand. I will turn now to the Secretary. Secretário, se você puder explicar um pouco mais sobre como os municípios e os estados podem utilizar o potencial de uso da
platform potential gov.br for the municipalities, and then I'll come back from the audience questions. Thank you. Well, we have a network around gov.br. It's our duty in the executive power not only to motivate and communicate what the states are doing, but also to offer the platforms. Although each one has the the freedom, the liberty, the autonomy to decide around these strategies, these technological strategies. We have here in the federal government a toolkit. So we had a number of platforms and methods and consultants to accelerate this digital transformation in states and municipalities. So I have a few examples. Today, the Rio Grande do Sul government doesn't have any identification from the citizens outside gov.br. The same with Minas Gerais, the same with the state of Goiás that just created a digital platform that it's called Expresso. The same with the governments from Belo Horizonte, the city of Maceió. So we offer the identification platforms, the interoperability, the solution development is naturally decentralized because it's where innovation is. Those who knows the needs of the traffic, the local traffic, it's that City Hall is that state. So it's important that these common platforms are part of the entire digital solution. So with this, we are capable to accelerate. We had digital processes before the strategy to be put in execution that would take 3-4 years. Today, the same projects that we have on average between the first day and the delivery 100 days, less than 3 months. So I'm happy to see that I was seeing some comments. One of my colleagues said someone from her family had the benefit in 30 days from the digital channel, and with this advance, it should have lasted 30 minutes and not 30 days. And this is the path that we are trying to look for, and I'm positive that we are going to get it. Thank you, Secretary. As you said, you have other commitments, the fact that you have this digitalization, that it's guided for the problem. So what is the demand of the society demand to advance in these processes? I believe that Brazil have multiple demands, as Secretary said, about the Brazilian cost, that we advance in this to facilitate and facilitate to open business and something that the government can facilitate. And I would like to explore a little bit more the data protection with you, Secretary. That is one of the questions from the audience. What is the maturity of the data protection? I would say how the federal government and your secretaries has been working in this data protection and privacy with this advance of this digitalization in the government. Great, this is very important. This is essential that it walks together. I recognize that Brazil, this data protection legislation that is established, it came later than what Floriano was talking about, the culture and in the European culture. But the private sector, we from the government, we are implemented LGPD in all the platforms, in all the digital services. Also for the ones that are interested inside the gov.br, we have a number of 6 guidance, practical guidance how to implement these services. You can say it's less debate and more actions. We have to do data protection reports to apply the controls about the data that are necessary and the ones that you do not need to collect. So everything is being done. It's under execution, and in gov.br we are already in a pilot with the Estonian platform that is to extract the data consumption throughout the government. So inside this app that it's already being tested with 100 people, inside this app you're going to have which organ, which government consulted each information, and we're also going to have a panic button, a red button in case you see that anything is strange. So that doctor that went to his ex-wife registration, the ex-wife will have a red button, a panic button to say this is not right, that is going to generate immediately we'll get a report that is going to be seen by the authorities. So this transparency to put the citizen in control. This is our objective with gov.br. The citizen will have control of its data and he will get the best decision if he wants to share his information to use a public or private service. So we have this normative part, we have this operational guidance and guidelines, the platforms that are what gonna make bring this to the real world, and society education. It's important to have events like this to educate society as the data protection importance and everything that we have to do when we are going to use and share, and this decision that it's taken every day throughout every platform in which data that I'm going to share. So gov.br protects the citizen data, and we understand that this is a essential requirement to advance in this digital governance. So if we do not work with this privacy, to be concerned about privacy, it wouldn't advance because the citizen trust in that platform wouldn't be enough for the protection. Thank you, Secretary. I would like to explore a different aspect about the digital transformation. We hear some jokes in some different public institutions as we cannot do the digitalization of our servers because the law does not allow us. I need to have the paper, or the public organizations will complain because I need to prove certain steps throughout physical papers. Is this true? How we can go through this without a new legislation to advance? I would like to hear about this. Excellent question, Caetano. Excellent. Usually they do not do these questions as you just did now. The digital transformation is not technology. It's a different mindset. We need to think different, to act different, to have different results. So to think different, how the public services, it only do what is allowed. It's fundamental that this regulation apply these concepts. I'm very thankful to be part and to support the debate. We have a mixed front in this digital economy. Many young, new and young people with important point of view that have the mission to look throughout these regulations, what are the stamps and the signatures and the forms that are there that are stopping this digital transformation. I would like to say that we advanced. We have a law that was done. It's the law 14129. This is about the digital transformation that is very objective about the obligation of this public, the obligation of these organs to do this in a transparent way about this privacy. In the federal government, we also have a few regulations in this way. We have a decree in the platform or digital citizenship. We have the public policies of open data. We have something that talks about the gov.br, this unique portal. We have a few legislations to share data. We are debating a lot. We have some courses with the society to understand what we need to evolve to guarantee that the citizen will trust the government. And I would like to say that all these instruments, these normative instruments that are necessary, but we know that we need the legal areas, we need the areas knowing that these barriers can be solved. We created more than 1,000 digital services throughout the public organizations. We have digital plans that I'm part of the committee that is going to manage this. We have more than 90 public organizations with more than 1,000 projects happening. All of them are available in gov.br, so you can follow up each delivery, what is being done, what is being planned. So we need energy to start this. It's an execution work. It's not only debate. It's less debate, more strategy. We need to organize multidisciplinary teams as squads, to put the squads to work with this solution, always with the user point of view, in the first-handed. We can do that. We are doing that. And I believe that it's working. Thank you, Secretary. I believe that's it. Technology is available, but we do need a guidance, a strategy throughout other initiatives. And we need training, and we need to change some legislations and others. I have a few questions that it's here. If Estonia, about the biometry, Florian already explained this. To collect this biometry, they are not doing this now, but we have more questions about types of initiatives that the municipalities can do to exchange information with the federal government. We have some comments about the debate, but I want to go back to Florian. Florian, gostaria da sua pergunta sobre a relação entre o setor privado
of digital transformation of Estonia. So what would you say is better done by the government itself, and what can be outsourced? And what are the type of public sector capacity that is needed in order to advance this process of digital transformation?
Put a very good question. Put very simply, I would say service management has to be a capacity developed within the government sector. Service development can be and should be handed over to the private sector. We see that traditionally the private sector is a more attractive workplace for most graduates. That's where they earn all the money and so on. So that's where they first look. And so in Estonia also since the early 1990s, we've given over the service development to the private sector, and then commissioned with particular requirements, of course, and then taken them over and managed them afterwards. This has actually led to an interesting, it's not a flip, it's not a complete transformation, but in Estonia, the government is seen as a very attractive employer. Right. So because it's seen as an agile workplace, I don't want to say a startup mentality. It's still a government, of course, but it's more agile than perhaps in most other countries. And so this has led to a situation where still the private sector develops all of these things with their different specialists, but that that we have a chief information officer who looks into the future, that we have cybersecurity teams that already look at quantum computing, that we have service designers that already think, how can we make, and this is the sort of mantra in Estonia right now, the best service is no service. How can we turn services invisible? So this is an interesting separation of roles and tasks for the private and public sector that has been working very well in Estonia.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you very much. We are coming to an end. We have only 2 minutes, so I will be very brief. Eu gostaria só de destacar aqui, o secretário compartilhou alguns links para nós, eu vou só mencionar para essas perguntas específicas.
Specific questions that were brought here. I recommend you to visit gov.br, and you're going to find different tools to facilitate this process. We have the operational guidelines to this, and I invite all of you to visit this portal. We also have an initiative from the National School and the Public Administration to train people in the area of digitalization in gov.br, and this national network that can be found. I would like to give each one of them 1 minute for the final presentation, and then I pass the floor against you, Marcos. I would like to thank you, Caetano. I would like to thank you, Firjan. I would like to thank you, Florian, because Estonia has been a partner from Brazil in this transformation journey. I would like to tell everyone that we here are working, we have this technical and dedicated work with a specialized team following the international references to deliver the service for the citizens. We are not where we wanted yet. We are not where the citizens deserve and where we want to get, but it's a path that we started. The digital transformation is already in Brazil, but we still have a lot to do, and we're going to do this together. And I'm pretty sure that this country will be very different after this digital transformation. Thank you, Secretary. We're going to keep you here with us. Florian, I invite you. Suas palavras finais, nós estamos chegando ao final.
Very insightful discussion. It's a pity that we don't have more time, but I'm sure that this inspired all of us to support the digitalization process of government services. Marcos, please.
Thank you very much. Just one sentence. Don't be afraid to reach out. Best practice sharing, just like this today, is the best thing that we can do. As Luigi already said, there is cooperation going on. There can be more in the future, and this is what we're all looking forward to.
Thank you. Obrigado a todos, obrigado ao público presente. As perguntas muito inspiradoras. Peço desculpas se eu não tratei.
I'm sorry if I didn't have a specific question, but I hope that you felt inspired as I felt with this innovation dialogue in partnership with Firjan and Faperj from the state of Rio de Janeiro. And we are going to end now. I would like to invite Antonio for his final works from Casa Firjan. Antonio, are you there? Thank you, everybody, for being here today. This life is coming to an end, with Professor Caetano said. Now is the time to help. We have millions of people in hunger in the state of Rio de Janeiro. So be part of SESI Cidadania Against Hunger and donate. And Firjan is going to produce a material in video synthesis and in video, and all this content will be available in Firjan website and in Instagram, Casa Firjan. So you can see the material, you can see the next edition. Next month we're going to have another with international speakers and a debate bringing a successful case in Brazil. Thank you.